Hey friends, Abaxial here with Game Gym Online. Today we're going to work on firing skill shots from close range. Why close range? The answer has to do with reaction time. The time it takes to move your mouse is almost imperceptible to you while you're doing it, but a longer distance is always going to be slower than a shorter distance. Most people figure this out intuitively. When you're laning and moving back and forth, you don't click from one end of the screen to the other. You click a little bit closer, so you don't have to move your mouse as far to change direction. However, there is another important part, which is angles. When your cursor is closer to you, you don't have to move it as far to change your angle. This lets you use smaller adjustments to pick your skill shot. Most people naturally place their cursor on top of the enemy champion or even overshoot them. This is fine on a stationary target, but if your opponent is moving back and forth, it forces you to make bigger movements to follow them. When we make those bigger movements, we might get stuck. Our hand might not be able to move as freely, and we can't put our skill shot exactly when we want it, where we want it. This is the legal equivalent of getting our ankles broken. So these close range skill shots, they might be a little counterintuitive, but with practice, you'll find that they help you stop from tripping over yourself. For our warm-up, we'll use Human Benchmark's famous, or perhaps infamous, reaction time test. Now, a disclaimer before we begin. If you're on an old monitor with 60 hertz refresh rate, your reaction time is going to be a little bit better than what this shows you. As well, you improve your reaction times with practice, so don't be discouraged if they seem a little bit slow. Lastly, you may already know this, but good rest, water, they help your nerves fire properly, so make sure you take care of yourself. That said, if you can beat me, I want to hear about it, so let us know. I'd say that was a pretty good set of 5. All right, let's get started. Hop into practice tool. I'm gonna go ahead and pick Ezreal. Your runes are not particularly important for this, but these are the ones I'm going to use. When we get in, we're going to turn on cooldown reduction. We're going to turn on mana regeneration. And we're going to also toggle off minion spawn. Now, what's going to be very important for us here is the key C. This is advanced character statistics, but it also shows us our attack range around our character. Now, we're going to be holding this down while we practice here, so make sure you're comfortable with that. I'm going to put a target dummy here, sort of in the middle of the base. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and fire Q at it. But we're going to fire Q from within our circle. We're going to try to be, pretty close to max range here. We're going to go around in a circle and try to keep our cursor within our own personal attack circle. Now, you're going to want to avoid using spacebar here, because as we move up, it gets a little bit difficult to see if you're trying to hold spacebar. As well, it's possible, but it's difficult to hold both C and spacebar at the same time. So I'd recommend you do this without your camera locked. Go around once or twice. Try and make sure that you're staying pretty close to max range. It's difficult to stay exactly max range while you're focusing on your circle. That's okay. Do your best. All right. Now, we'll make it a little harder. We're going to do this from halfway within the circle. Now, you're going to miss sometimes here. I'm missing too. The point is not so much to, be able to do it perfectly like this, because I think that's a little unrealistic. The point is more to show that there is a point of a little too much, a point at which it gets hard to aim when you're placing it halfway. So you want to keep, you want to aim for somewhere between halfway and the end of your circle when we're firing our skill shots. That way we have the best compromise between speed and accuracy. Once you've gone around a couple times and are feeling comfortable, we'll move on to the next exercise. We're going to allow minions to spawn now. And fast forward by 30, get them to lane. And what we're going to do is we can push, we can last hit, we can do kind of whatever we want here. But the point is to only use Q and try to farm from max range when possible. You'll quickly find that if you're trying to keep your cursor close to your character, you're going to miss a few times. It's going to be a little bit more difficult. You can move to any lane on the map as you like with Shift plus S. The rule is no auto attacks. You must do your best to keep your cursor next to your character. When you start walking around the backline minions, you'll notice that when you start changing the angles, it starts getting a little bit hard to aim it exactly where you want it. So you can cheat with Shift S. But keep moving around. Just try to farm for them, say 6 waves. Trying to only use Q, trying to keep your cursor close to your character. Uh-oh. Ah! No! You see, this isn't easy, even for me. When you're done with that, we can move on to the next exercise. In this next exercise, we'll learn not just to do close range skill shots, but to use them in succession. Buffering is where you use one ability after the other. Most abilities have a cast time of a quarter or half second. You press 1 while the first one's firing, and it'll happen immediately after. There's also animation canceling, but we're not going to worry about that now. That's only on specific champions. For now, we're going to work with Ezreal's WQ combination. Most of the time, you're just going to fire them in the same direction, and that's going to be good enough. But if your target is moving from side to side or up and down, you may need to space them out a little bit. So we have 2 target dummies like this in order to simulate that movement. And now what we want to do is, like earlier, where we were firing skill shots, trying to stay within our C circle, we are also going to try and do that while moving like so. Something you'll quickly learn here is to not move as fast as possible. If you press W and Q almost instantaneously, they'll often go in the same direction. The game doesn't actually care where within that quarter of a second you press a second ability. Your animation time is going to be the same. So it's better to make sure that you consciously move your cursor between abilities. Make sure you know exactly where they're going to fire. Now, let's start making this a little bit more difficult. Some of you may already know that you can flash during the animation time of your Q. It'll start from where you flash to, but the target is going to be from where you aim your cursor. So look carefully. I'm going to be from the right side. I'm going to fire it towards the center here. But you're going to see that it went in a different direction from where I started from, because it's aiming at where my cursor was. again, again. Now, with flash combinations, they're just like what we talked about in terms of buffering abilities. The Q has a cast time of 1/4 of a second. The game doesn't care where within that cast time you move. So if you do it very quickly, it'll look like this, where it looks almost the same as if I had just flashed first and then hit Q. Or if I wait a little bit, you can see that it only fires, sort of the moment I'm coming away, or the moment I arrive at that location. Generally speaking, it's better to do it a little bit later. You give your opponents a little bit less time to react. And as well, this fits the theme of trying to stay relaxed, trying to make sure that we aim our skills properly and not just move as fast as possible. Now, to make it a little bit more complicated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and fire on a moving target. I'm going to use W towards this guy. I'm going to use Q towards this guy, and I'm going to flash afterwards. In addition, I'm going to be holding down C so that I know I'm trying to keep my cursor relatively close to my character. So it's going to look like a 3-step process like this. Almost. Little too slow there. And that time I aimed it towards the other guy. There we go. So try and repeat that until you can do it. Try and understand how to be conscious with your mouse movement. That's our big takeaway from today. We want you to learn how to be conscious with our mouse movement. All right, time to play as you're in a real game. Focus closely at the beginning of the game. If you leash for your jungler, throw that Q from close range while it's on a monster, it's easy to hit. And when you first come to lane, try and throw that first Q. Perhaps doesn't matter too much if you hit it. Try and take a risk, try and do something that's a little uncomfortable for you. Throw it from close range. Just doing it a few times at the start like this will help you remember to keep doing it throughout the game. And don't stress out if you mess up here and there. You're playing for the long term to improve over months rather than to just win this one game. So again, work outside your comfort zone. Our big lesson today was firing these skill shots from close range, and also to stay relaxed when we do these ability combinations. They work very similarly on a lot of champions. So whether it's one ability after the other or ability and then flash, use the ability, make sure your cursor is in the spot you really want it to be, then use it. 1/4 of a second, it might sound fast, but when you play the game, when you actually look at your fingers, you realize, that's a long time. I have time to think about what I want to do. So there you go. That's our practice for today. Thanks for being with us, and good luck.